Thank you, Andrew. Stephanie, do you mind if I erase your word of the day? If you'll give me just a moment here, folks. Thank you. Good evening, fellow Toastmasters and guests. Thank you for coming tonight. This evening's speech is purported to be a humorous speech, but I can hardly think of anything less funny than somebody standing up here trying to be. So rather than trying to be a comic tonight, what I decided to do instead was to bring you a few examples of some of the limericks that I've written in the past. Now, if you're not familiar with what a limerick is, you will be by the time we get done tonight. I've always kind of found limericks to be fun and therapeutic to some degree. The very first limerick that I ever wrote, I was about 12 years old. And I had been invited by my best friend to attend church services at the local Methodist church with him and his family one Sunday morning. Well, I accepted his invitation, and I sat in the congregation listening to the sermon, but I was distracted because the preacher was kind of a slim guy. He was kind of skinny, kind of short. But on top of this rather frail frame, he had a very large head. It was like a little guy with a big guy's noggin. And so I really had a hard time concentrating on the sermon. And so when I got home, I sat down and put pen to paper, and I wrote my very first limerick. And it went something like this. There once was a Methodist preacher who had a most interesting feature. So large was his head, it was generally said, he could pass for an alien creature. Now, I thought that was kind of cute when I was 12. My friend Barry, on the other hand, didn't share my enthusiasm for that humor, which is when I learned that humor, much like beauty, is very much in the eye of the beholder. Fast forward about 3 or 4 years later, I was a teenager at this point, and a few of my friends and I had formed a little rock and roll band. We weren't very good, but we liked to play anyway. And we had a keyboard player named Daniel. Now, Daniel was a pretty normal teenage boy, except for one thing. Daniel loved to wear pants that were about 3 sizes too small, really tight. Now, I never understood whether Daniel was attempting to make a fashion statement or if he just didn't know how ridiculous he looked. But I wouldn't say encouraged, but he inspired me to write another limerick, which I did. And it went something like this. I once knew a singer named Dano who stood while he played the piano. When he took a wide stance, so tight were his pants that his voice changed from bass. I just have to say that Daniel didn't appreciate this little video. So I continued to write limericks throughout my adult life. I just enjoyed them. They were a lot of fun. And I continued to write. And as I started going back through some of the limericks that I had written to prepare for this presentation tonight, I realized that over the years, the way I wrote limericks kind of changed a little. And so I brought an example of what I consider to be sort of maybe a slight bit more sophistication in my writing. And also I had a tendency to want to try to find really odd words or odd names of things and put those in limericks as well. So this is an example of one. There was a carnivorous flower that ate with incredible power. It could gobble a new in a minute or two and devour 1 gour per hour. That's one of my favorites. So, as I said, I continued to write limericks just for fun, and I wrote a lot of them over the years. And one of the things that I did was, as my kids got old enough to be able to read, each Christmas I would write one for each of my 5 kids. And I would print it out on colored paper, roll it up like a scroll, put it on the tree. So Christmas morning, they'd get their limerick, and then as they were opening presents, they had the opportunity then to recite their personal limerick. And I did a lot of those over the years, but one of them that I particularly like is one that I wrote for my daughter named Shelley. It went something like this. The florist wore lavender clothes. From his hat grew a pale yellow rose. His wife of 10 years had chrysanthemum ears, and his daughter had tulips for toes. Now, it's not hilarious, but it was kind of cool, and my daughter Shelley loved it. What I would like to do this evening is to stress to you the value of doing something like this. It's a lot of fun if you can write a limerick. If you're having a bad day, sit down and write a limerick. Anybody can do this. If things are not going your way, if you're overcome by the bad news, the hurricanes, the earthquakes, the North Koreans, whatever it is that's upsetting you, sit down and write a limerick. Because so now, my fellow Toastmasters, in this age with so many disasters, we can still laugh at times with some limerick rhymes about big-headed Methodist preachers. We have time for one more?
Yep.
Okay. From 5 to 7's the limit, but it's so hard to keep it within it. So I made up this rhyme to eat up more time just in case I still need it.